Attention, veterans, patriots, family and friends of veterans, historians, genealogists, and those who love a good story. This is one of the continuing episodes of our oral histories, and this one is entitled Veterans with Valor. Again, attention everyone. Present arms. Order, arms. Each, better stop. It's a great pleasure to introduce, well, we honor all veterans and those who have served and their families who have supported them in all of the military. Each veteran and their stories are unique. This is going to be a presentation of one of the veterans, and on behalf of the Campbell County Historical Society and the continuing oral history project, and through the cooperation of the Campbell County Media
Central.
Media what?
Central.
Media Central. We present this next episode and this is going to be a person that you will honor. And I would like to ask everyone to, when you see a veteran, thank a veteran, because they have done a lot of things. They are what makes America work. And so many times they go unrecognized. And even though we are losing 4,000 World War II veterans a day, the staggering odds are we're losing 10 Vietnam era, Desert Storm era, Afghanistan and Iraq era, 10 veterans to suicide every hour. So if you know somebody that possibly needs help, have them ask. Get a hold of the medical people at the VA or through their church or through a veterans organization. And now, I'll be in the area for a while, at ease and as you were. Here's our next guest.
Hi, my name is Christen. I live at 3977 Isis Road, California, Kentucky.
And how long have you lived here?
Well, we've been married 18 years.
So you moved here shortly after you were married?
Yes.
And did you meet your husband in the service?
No, I had his youngest daughter in 5th and 6th grade down at St. Philip. I was teaching there.
And how long did you teach?
Well,
A couple of semesters or years or?
oh, well, I've taught 13 years in an actual classroom, but I've been subbing ever since then. For several
And
years.
your career actually started at St. Philip, or did you teach in other schools before you were there?
I taught at 2 other schools before that, one over in Ohio and one in Independence.
Yeah. For those that are unaware about St. Philip, it's a private Catholic school. The parish was started about 1910, and they have had a couple of occasions that they were so close to low enrollment
Yes.
that there was always the thought they might have to combine with St. Joseph at Camp Springs. And people have told me the interest, oh, we can't join those folks. Those are our cousins,
Yeah.
which struck me as kind of a funny conversation. So what year were you teaching at St. Philip?
I was at St. Philip from 88 to 97.
Well, that's a good career in one school for sure, and then you've been subbing in a lot of other places.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to ask you about your early childhood. You were born in St. Louis,
I was born in St. Louis,
and your parents met at a...
USO in St. Louis.
Okay.
My dad was stationed at Scott Air Force Base, and I have 6 siblings. I'm the 6th of 7.
And the rest still live in the St. Louis area?
3 live in the St. Louis area. One's up outside of Chicago. One's outside of Madison, Wisconsin. And my brother's in Alabama.
Well, they're spread out pretty much all over the central part of the United States.
Yes.
Were any other of your siblings in the military?
My brother was in the Air Force.
So this has been an Air Force family.
Yes.
Your father,
yes,
you, and your brother.
Yes.
And why did you actually get involved in the Air Force? You like the uniforms?
I did like the uniforms compared to the other ones, but Air Force was paying 75% of your tuition to go to college, as the other ones were doing like just 25 or something. And then with it being an Air Force family,
Yeah.
went with the Air Force.
And also this little side to this, I have a son that retired from the Air Force. He did 14 years or 15 years active. And he asked me at one point about where he thought his career should be. And I said, well, the Air Force lived better in Vietnam than I did in the Army and the States. Something about having those large airplanes that carry stakes and building material and color TV and air conditioners. So the Air Force is somewhat of a better life than the rest of the military if you're qualified to be in the Air Force. And I'll say that because everybody doesn't make it to the Air Force, do they?
You know, our one grandson, he calls the Air Force the elite. He goes, oh yeah, you guys just fly over things.
And so in reality, there's a lot of jobs in the Air Force that are not necessarily connected with airplanes.
Yes.
Directly, and I know there are. So what did you do in the Air
I
Force?
was a dietitian assistant.
Ah.
I did ward rounds. I gave prenatal and cardiac classes, and I would check the trays before they went up to the wards.
Now, is it true that the Air Force actually has breakfast in bed?
If you're in the hospital.
That was another one of those insights to my son, and he always said, Dad, that's a rumor that somebody started that doesn't know anything about the military.
Yeah.
So in reality, it's a good story. But you did check, and that some people do get breakfast in bed.
Yeah.
Okay, how long were you in the military?
I was active duty from 73 to 77, and I was in the reserves from 83 to 88.
That's a good long career. Now I'm going to go back and ask you a little bit about your life in St. Louis, your early life. Do you remember the school teachers' names? Some of your teachers?
I remember my kindergarten teacher, she was Miss Shirley, because she had always wore red lipstick. And then we had, the school I went to was a parochial school, and he had these older German nuns. And so we remember Sister Adolphus. And you couldn't complain to your parents about Sister Adolphus because they were afraid of her too.
Yeah, and that was kind of the old strict German nuns.
Yeah, if you did anything wrong, you were Dummkopf.
So you went to all 8 grades, I guess, in a private Catholic school, or did you go further?
No, I went to the parochial school from kindergarten to 6th grade, and then we went to a local public school, 7th and 8th grade. And my high school years were at a public school also.
I see. And when you were in middle school and high school, did you have some hobbies or extracurricular activity that got you excited about something? Must have been something in high school.
In high school, well, I've always liked to read.
Uh-huh.
So I do a lot of reading and things along that line.
Okay. Well, when you left high school, was that about the time that you decided to be in the Air Force?
Yes.
Okay.
Because I graduated in June of 72 and then left to begin like the 3rd of January of 73.
And where were you stationed?
Well, first I was at Lackland.
Which is in Texas?
It's in Texas, San Antonio. And the day that I left for basic training in Wisconsin, it was 10 below zero with a wind chill factor of 52 below. And we got down to San Antonio and it was 78 degrees.
Oh, big change.
I couldn't breathe.
So why were you in Wisconsin? I guess I missed that. I thought you went from St. Louis High School.
My dad is from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and he always wanted to move back north. And so when most of the siblings were all married, my younger sister and I, we moved to Milwaukee.
I see. And did you actually finish high school in Milwaukee then?
Yes,
Okay.
Bayview. It overlooks the Bay of Lake Michigan.
Yeah, that's a big change in temperature. Now, after you were at Lackland, and is that the only basic training for Air Force?
Yes,
Okay. So everybody who goes in the Air Force winds up in
at
Texas?
Lackland, yes. And then from there I went to Shepherd Air Force Base in Wichita Falls, Texas, and did my tech school. And then I wanted to go somewhere else, but that's where I was stationed after tech school with Shepherd. And then I met my ex-husband there, and he got, because he had been in Vietnam, he got base of choice, and so then we came up to Wright-Patterson because he's from Kentucky.
And that was going to be the next question. How did you wind up in the greater Cincinnati area?
Yes, well, we came up here, and I worked in the medical center, and he was in awards and decorations, and then he got an opportunity to be like not a drill sergeant, but he was in charge of this
Some type of instructor.
down in Texas, so we went back down to Shepherd.
Okay, I mentioned earlier that we might be talking about when you got your driver's license or your first car. Was that in the military?
No, I didn't get my driver's license until I was 30.
Well,
Because it was like, well, I really did. All of my siblings also was like, we were all adults before we got our driver's license because they weren't going to get us a car anyway.
Yeah.
And I believe my brother probably knew how to drive, but the rest of us didn't. And so I didn't get, I always had little clunker cars, but I got my own new car in 2000.
well, sometimes it's not a bad thing to learn to drive when you're older. And I'm kind of glad that the state of Kentucky has said that you have to have a training period. Now, when I got my license, you took the test, and if you passed the test, you were on your own. You could do anything you wanted to. But the safety involved now, where kids are, there's that 6-month period that they have to have another. So anyhow, it probably was good that you were a little older when you got your driver's license.
Yes.
The exuberance of youth sometimes gets in the way of common sense, I think. So, you have a car now, or you didn't drive then, but when you were in the military, did you do any transportation things, or did you just catch a bus, or?
Well, in tech school, because of safety reasons, the girls, we lived in dorms that had a fence all around us, and they would take us to tech school on buses. And the guys would complain, going, why do we have to march and the girls have to get to ride a bus? It says, because you harass the girls. So that's why we rode the buses.
Yeah.
When...
Or did you put up with nonsense?
No, I didn't put up with nonsense. When I interviewed at St. Philip's, I found that some of the parents were concerned that, oh, a military person. They didn't know what I was going to be doing. And then they saw me, and I'm not that big or anything.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I'm sure your career there at St. Philip and other schools was certainly a treasure in your life. Now, do you remember any incidences that were kind of out of the ordinary that at that school or any other school, and where the kids might have been looking for a little fun with the teacher or something like that, and
No.
Basically, there's teachers remember certain kids in school that did things, and we're not asking for names.
Oh.
Were there ever any incidences that you had to remember? I'll have to remember to write that in a book someday, or tell my friends or something. Well, I guess the kids at St. Philip were pretty.
It was like teachers would go to meetings or something, and we would, like some of the public school teachers, and we'd go, oh, so-and-so was talking in class, or they were chewing gum. They go, what? So we got kids bringing weapons to school, and fighting and everything. No, we don't have that.
So you taught a lot of years in the parochial system, and as a sub, are you in the county system now, or are you not doing that anymore?
For subbing, I'm at Erlanger, Ellesmere, Campbell County, and Fort Thomas.
So that's a wide variety of cultural background.
Yeah.
And how often do you sub on an average?
Several years ago, I got quite a few days,
Mm-hmm.
but the schools are trying to get the teachers not to really take off, and for them to have to pay, and so recently, past few years, I probably get like maybe a few days a week, if that. And in February, when we had the really bad weather, I think I got 1 day in the whole month.
Well, but it's a good part-time job to fall back on, and it keeps you active in that system. So now we're going to ask you to introduce your husband and how you met, and we're going to ask him a couple of serious questions. And we're going to ask him to move around a little bit so that we can... Now you've got your Air Force book here while he's moving, and you're going to get ready to introduce him. This is your basic training or your graduating class?
Yes, they didn't
book.
have a lot of the girls in there, but it had a thing of, and you can barely see me, of when we're marching.
Yeah, and that's something I guess a lot of people don't understand. If you're in the military, you do a lot of close order drill and marching and things like that, and it really looks good, but it's precision. And, you know, I sometimes talk about some of my close friends that we walked 20 miles together, and we were in such a wonderful hurry. But these are the friends that you have for the rest of your life. Do you still have military friends that you
I had
communicate with?
contacted one a few years ago. She was my roommate in basic training. And, because like the guys were like these 1,000-man dorms, whereas we had the old dorms, and there were 3 girls in each room. And maybe now the girls are all in big dorms too, but I don't know. But we had the old dorms.
Trick question.
It sure was, because I don't know.
Well, I know they have flights and they have wings. And
Yeah, we were flight 3, and there were several flights. You have like sister flights, and they were like on the other side of the dorm than us. And you have it wasn't called a mother, but it was those who had been in the basic training longer, and they would sort of like our first few weeks, they were like keeping an eye on.
And helping you with the ropes and teaching you what
Yes.
the military was expecting of civilians.
Yeah, there was a girl I went to high school with. She left for the Marines the same day I left for the Air Force, and she didn't stay in very long, and it was like, you know, they were like yelling at her, and or they would do things in the Marines that they didn't. And for us, it was like nobody touched you, and nobody cussed you out or anything like that. And if somebody yelled at you, I had a strict dad. He was a drill sergeant, and so it was like, well, there's no big deal to get yelled at. If somebody can't touch me, I'm not going to worry about it.
You were in the elite.
I was in the elite.
Well, now tell me about your husband. How did you meet him? And
Okay, it's my husband, Leo. We met several years after his daughter was in my class. I was supposed to go, my daughter and her friends, they were going to a Valentine's Day party dance. And they go, Murray, why don't you get somebody to go with you? I don't know. And so I was like, who do I know? So I asked one of the moms of some of my former students, I asked her, I said, what do you think if I call Leo Christen? And she went, oh, I think that would be great. She said, you two would be great together. So I called him, but he had been dating somebody at the time, and so then later on, several months later, he called me, and we went to a Sawyer Brown concert, and then we dated ever since then.
well, that's great. That's great.
Well, you gave me your phone number and said, well, if things don't work out, you can call me. So, and it did.
Leo, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. You recently retired. Am I
That's correct, yeah. 42 years at the
And there was a surprise party
Empire.
for you, wasn't there?
Yeah, there
Okay,
was.
you want to tell us a little bit about your career as your 42 years and how you felt about that surprise party?
Well, I worked 42 years at the Enquirer, and the Enquirer, they moved their production plant to the Columbus Dispatch in Columbus, Ohio. So all the people at the production facility were laid off, including me. So I got a really good severance package, so I was able to retire. So anyway, my daughter decided to have a surprise birthday party for me. And she said we were having a birthday party for her son. So we went there, and sure enough, my whole family's there in a big crowd, and I was really surprised. Wasn't expecting it.
Well, that's why they call them surprise
So, yeah.
parties, I guess. So were you a pressman, or were you...
No, I was in the mailers union.
I see.
We took the newspapers off the presses, and we bundled them and counted them, and mostly watching machinery that stacked the papers. And we also had big machines that put the advertisements into like the Sunday paper. So I worked on those big machines that did that also. But it's mostly working on machinery and watching machinery to make sure it doesn't malfunction.
Now, you know, there are a lot of terms in the printing industry that could be confusing. Pressman, that's easy to understand, the presses. But there are people that press clothes that are called pressmen too. And in the phone industry, there are switchmen, which is pretty common with railroad industry.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going to mention this little, a friend of mine was talking to his buddy, and his buddy said that his dad was a bookie. And my friend interpreted that to mean that he worked in the printing press business. He said, my dad is a bookie too. His dad had worked on presses, and he always had that black ink, impossible to get out. Now, you probably had mechanic grease that could...
I had ink also from handling the newsprint.
The equipment. And what's the secret to get rid of that newsprint ink?
Scrubbing it really hard.
That's what I thought. So your 40 years, you were primarily in Cincinnati all that time?
Yes.
And
I started out at 617 Vine Street, and then in 1979, the Enquirer built a new printing facility on Western Avenue in the Queensgate area. So after 9 years of working at the Enquirer, they moved us over to Queensgate. Mm-hmm.
And eventually, they bought the Post. Is that accurate, or were they part of the same thing?
It was a merger, and it worked out really good for me because I had been working at the Enquirer, and when the Enquirer took over the Post, my seniority, I went ahead of everybody else at the Post, so it really worked out good for us, and it put me like on day shift where I was working nights, so it was an advantage for me.
So sometimes a change is good.
Well,
most of us resist change,
but the disadvantage was my father, he was working at the Post and he lost his job.
Oh.
So,
that's,
yeah, it helped me, but it didn't help my dad.
Yeah. So do you actually farm? Do you have a pretty good size?
I have 40 acres here. We have 4 cows and we raise a garden. We do a lot of canning, but we raise the cattle mostly just to have slaughtered for ourselves.
I see.
Once in a while, if I have an extra one, I'll take it up to Maysville to the stockyard.
Well, and that's something that small farmers are still a necessity in this economy, you know, especially in Campbell County. The land is not conducive to have 400 acres of soybeans or something like that. So small farmers are still very vibrant in Campbell County. And just for another side, this month, the last dairy farm in Campbell County is going to close. Only because the guy hit 65, I think, or something. And at one point, there were a ton of dairy farms in Campbell County, a ton of them, a ton of dairies.
Oh, yeah.
And did you ever have dairy cattle?
Never did.
Never. So you've always had beef cattle.
Just beef cattle, yes.
And I know you've been involved with the Campbell County Historical Society for a lot of years. What intrigued you to get involved there? Both of you.
Well, I kind of like history, and I'm also more interested in genealogy, and the Historical Society has both segments, so that's what kind of lured me there.
And all of the genealogists become historians accidentally, I think.
They do.
But historians do not always become genealogists.
That's
so
true.
We're thankful for your interest in genealogy. And Marie, were you excited about the Historical Society, or you are a tag-along wife?
In the beginning, I was a tag-along wife, and but not being from around here, I don't find as much information as he does. He can go to the library and find out all kinds of stuff. I'd have to go to St. Louis or Michigan or something, and he's finding more things out. You know, like about being German and that. I can't find too much on my Italian side of family because I don't speak Italian, so. Trying to contact somebody, most things are in Italian, and I can't get anywhere.
Things like that. Have you done a lot of research at the Historical Society, or have you done a lot at the library? Have you done
Mostly at the library, and we went to Switzerland several years ago because my family originated in central Switzerland back in the 1500s. And we went there, and they have this thing called the Christen Stammbuch. And it starts out with the patron saint of Switzerland. His name is St. Nicholas of Flue. But anyway, it traced the generations of my Christian family all the way down. And when I first started doing the research, I wrote to the state archives there. And they kept writing to me in German, and I really didn't understand what they were wanting. But after I realized they were wanting my family tree as far back as I could go, then, I think they would help me. So I got my family tree together, and I went back, I think, to like the mid-1700s. So anyway, I sent it to them, and sure enough, they sent me this big family tree back, going all the way back to this saint. And I was really surprised. Yeah. So I actually went there, and I looked at the book, and right before I went to Europe, I put my family tree on this French website called Genealogical, because my ancestors had immigrated from Switzerland to France. So anyway, I put it on there, and right before I went, I got an email from a fellow in Switzerland, and he says, here's my family tree, look at yours. He says, our great-great-grandfathers were brothers. Wow. So I told him, well, I'm coming to Europe. Is it possible to get from Germany down to Switzerland, fairly easily? He said, yeah, it's really easy. So he sent me a train schedule. Yeah. And sure enough, we caught the train in Osnabrück, Germany, because I was staying with another cousin there. And the train ride went right down the Rhine River. Beautiful ride. And he met me there, and we went to the archives, and he spoke perfect English. He was an editor of the newspaper in Zurich, Switzerland. And it was really helpful. He took me to some of the places, and I met some other Christian cousins from there.
So initially, when you were getting this information in German, did you have to get a translator?
I actually did a lot of work and stumbled through it with a
dictionary.
Dictionary, yeah.
And you mentioned going down by the Rhine River. The transportation system in Europe is phenomenal compared to.
Yes.
We all get in our car. Everybody in America seems to have. If you're going 3 people going to the same place, you take at least 2 cars because somebody has some other place to go later. In Germany, you get on that train or the bus to get to Switzerland and the Rhine River. And what have you always heard about the Rhine River? Why did the Germans settle here? Did it look like the Rhine River Valley?
Yes, it did. When we went through Baden, the hillsides, they were really steep, and they were just covered with grapes. And I think Kentucky, this area here was similar to that because the grapes don't like to get their roots wet. That's why they planted them on hills. But the hills were so steep, I don't know how they ever picked them. Well, we visited churches where my ancestors had lived and where they were baptized. And we were in Wolfenchies in Switzerland, which is in central Switzerland, and that's the city my family originated, as far back as I could go.
Big city or
it's a small town.
Small town. Okay.
But anyway, in the church there, I have a ancestor. He'd be about a 11th great-grandfather, and he was a hermit. His name was Conrad Schäuber, and he's buried in this sarcophagus right in front of the main altar of the church.
Wow.
And his grandfather, St. Nicholas of Flue, he was canonized in 1947. We went to visit that church also, and that is in Stans, Switzerland, which is nearby Wolfenchies. But anyway, he has a gold sarcophagus, and his sarcophagus is part of the actual altar.
Wow.
So
your family history certainly has, it goes a long way, and you've been fortunate to trace this.
I have.
If you had advice to tell people who are getting into genealogy, what would you tell them?
Start with yourself and move slowly, and you want to record everything you find because, you know, if you're guessing, your information isn't any good. It's got to be verified. That's what I've always done anyway.
And you mentioned going slowly. You can't take
You can't
5
rush
generations
through.
in one
No.
shot.
You have to prove what you find.
Yeah. And that's where we mentioned earlier about the people naming their nephews or their first son after an older brother, and it might have even been a grandfather. So the painstaking genealogy, I think, is what intrigues so many people.
I have a story for you.
All right.
My name is Leo Christen Jr. My dad's name was Leo Christen, and his dad was Leo Christen. I thought it was anyway. I got his actual baptismal record from Mulhouse, France, and his name was Leopold. And we had never seen that name or heard that name. He was always called Leo, and all the records I found on him were Leo. So anyway, my mom was still alive at the time, and I called her up. My father, he was already deceased.
Mm-hmm.
But I told my mom, I says, hey, Grandpa's name wasn't Leo, it was actually Leopold. And my mom says, it's a good thing your dad didn't know that.
Because you may have been.
I might have been Leopold.
Yeah. Now, have you lived in Campbell County all your life?
No, I moved here when I got married in 1970.
So where did you grow up?
I grew up in Covington,
Uh-huh.
yes.
Well, you know, our lives make kind of funny bends and little crooks, and we are a result of our environment more so than who our great-grandparents were. I think we're environment-orientated because we are part of, if we're around people that are hardworking people and have a sense of history, then we kind of pick that up too. Whereas, you know, it's wonderful that your great-great-great-great-11th great-grandfather has a gold sarcophagus.
Yeah.
But, you know, as humans, we don't meet those people. The only thing we know is we have to read about them.
Right.
And we can only hope that as historians, we put a little bit more history in for the next generation or the generation after that. You know, it's such hard work finding facts, isn't it?
But you don't want names, you want stories
Right.
to
Yes.
go with it to make it interesting. Because if somebody just reads a bunch of names and dates, you know, who cares? But if you can read an interesting story about a person, like my ancestor was a saint, he was in the Swiss Army, but they said he fought with a sword in one hand and a rosary in the other. That's what's written about him. So,
I always tell the students, you know, it's like when they talk to their grandmothers and great-grandmothers and, you know, relatives. I said, because when an older person dies, a history book dies. I said, and like you were saying, that you don't just go with the dates, you got to go with interesting stories and things. I said, find out what they were doing when these different things in history happened. And that, like, on my dad's side of the family, there was this couple from Italy, and they were in Crystal Falls, Michigan, and people wanted, you know, like boots and shoes and things made, and they didn't have anybody. And he goes, hey, I know a family in Italy, they're all shoemakers. And so he sent for this guy, and he's like my great uncle, and there was so much business for making shoes and boots that Giuseppe contacted his brother Emil, and he came over, and then my grandfather decided, hey, if they're doing so well, I'll go over there too. And there's an uncle, he has a news clipping, and it says when after World War I, or during World War I, these people in the town, they weren't getting any shoes made because the two guys had gone off the war. So when the war was over, there was the article says that the whole town went down to the train station and go, the shoemakers are back, the shoemakers are back.
Those wonderful stories. Now, I'm going to ask you about growing up again, Marie. Do you remember peace marches and...
Yes, I grew up on the north side of St. Louis, and we had basically in a black neighborhood. I mean, I think there were two families, white families, other than that. And one Sunday, after church, there wouldn't be anybody in the neighborhood. It's like, where is everybody at? And on a Monday, during the summer, I remember my sister and I were outside playing, and this car pulled up with all these white guys in it. It's like, well, there aren't any white guys in our neighborhood, so what do these two guys want? And they wanted to know where this one particular, if I knew where this man lived, if I knew who he was, and I go, no, I don't think so. He was our next door neighbor. I knew who he was.
Yeah.
And they were going, well, we were just interested to talk to him, and so we went. I said, no, I don't know. And so then my dad wanted to know who we were talking to, and so we went into the house, and he's like, what's going on? I said, they want to know where Mr. Hurst lived. He goes, no, you didn't tell me anything, did you? I said, no, but they had come from the south, and they wanted to get Mr. Hurst, because what was going on is after church, they would all get on the bus and go down to try to get, other people to sign up for, the vote and things like that.
And, that's the thing about neighborhoods. They're very protective, and even if you're of a different ethnic group or something like that, a stranger comes in, you're protective of your friends and your neighbors. And I think that kind of rings true to most people in America. We're protective. We gripe a little bit about what's going on in the rest of the world, but if it's in our community, we're very protective and observant about what's going on. So I thank you for your information there on that. Now, is there any other stories you want to tell us about when you were growing up, or things that were happening in St. Louis in that time frame? You graduated in '72.
From up in
Up in
Milwaukee.
Milwaukee.
Yeah, Milwaukee, yes. Well, the high school I went to was the same one that Spencer Tracy went to.
Is that right?
Yes, and my mom used to play bingo with Liberace's mom.
Well, see, there's those neat stories.
And in St. Louis, I remember, like you say, like different things in history. What were you doing at that time? And I remember when Kennedy was shot, we were in school, and then all of a sudden there was a TV, and we never had TV in school, and they had put it in the hall so that people and everybody came out of the classrooms to watch this. And then also I remember clear as anything in '68 when Martin Luther King was shot. I was laying on the bed and listening to a transistor radio, and they said that King had been shot, and I went into the kitchen and I said, Martin Luther King was just shot. And my mom and dad went running into the living room, turned on the TV, see what was going on.
It's amazing. We always remember those important things, where we were, what we were doing when President Kennedy was killed, Martin Luther King was killed, the airplanes hit the buildings in New York, and other things. Your oldest memory, do you remember when you were 3 years old, or 4 or 5?
I remember one, St. Louis gets hit with a lot of tornadoes. And my sister and I were in bed. Of course, a lot of times the tornadoes hit at night. And I remember when I was 3 years old, a tornado was coming through, and my parents were getting everybody in the basement. And my dad grabbed my sister and I by our bedclothes, pulled us out of bed, and the wall came down.
Oh, wow.
And then my parents didn't like this, but I thought it was exciting. A tree came in our kitchen, and the whole kitchen was filled with all these branches and everything. It's like, wow, look at that.
It's a lot more exciting when you're a child than it is when you're the parent and going to have to figure it out to repair the roof. Leo, do you remember something early in your life?
I was about 3 or 4 years old, and I remember my grandmother had this piano, and I remember sitting there banging on the keys. That's about my earliest memory.
Okay. So how many siblings do you have?
I have 5 siblings. There's 5 boys and 1 girl.
And their names are?
There's Jim, Dan, Larry, Mary Lee, and Jerry.
And they're all in northern Kentucky?
All in northern Kentucky, yes.
Yeah. Growing up in Covington, was there anything specific that you remember in the 70s and 80s that struck in your mind, as far as peace marches or things like that?
No, not so much.
Covington was not really a real hubbub of activity,
No.
but there were a lot of northern Kentucky residents that were participating in peace marches and things like that. Do you remember Father Dye from Mother of God or something? He was one of the walked hand in hand with Martin Luther King.
Yeah.
And now I think Father has died. I know he's died, but he was always such an interesting. Did you ever meet him?
No, but I've read about him.
Yeah.
I think he was in Newport for a while.
Yes, he
wasn't
was. Yes,
Yeah.
he was. And Northern Kentucky is just so full of stories where various congregations come together for a common cause. And I'm going to go with the clergy again here for a few seconds. Father Biding, who had Campbell Lodge for a long time, finally went down and he founded CAP, Christian Appalachian Project, to bring education down. And where I'm going with this was an educator who eventually had taught in the Campbell County public system, and she taught in other schools, and she taught in Cincinnati. But after a couple of bouts with cancer, and around here that's 1 in 3 of us are going to wind up there, she wound up working for Christian Appalachian Project down in the mountains of Kentucky for $20 a month. But she said that was the happiest teaching job she ever had. And I'm sure you feel, I'm going to go back to your teaching career, a very rewarding career, wasn't it?
Yes. Yes, it's like, because you're touching the future. You're doing what you can, because people will say, oh, talk about the kids and that, and it's like, I wanted to do what I could, my part into making kids successful and teaching them things, because with the things that I had gone through, these little bunch of little white kids who live in a rural area, and they were my things that I would talk about in the military are about the civil rights things and along that line. They were like, wow, I didn't know that happened, and like with having my siblings all over the country, I would get, the kids all thought I traveled a lot, but I would just get pictures of different areas, around, and one like when I was in high school, I used to help the Prime Minister of the Black Student Union in physics class, and he would let me know if there was going to be any trouble in school, and then my sister and I would get an early dismissal. Because one time, the Black Panthers came to our high school. I don't know why they came there. They were mad about something, but my sister and I, we got an early dismissal, and we got out of there. And
you were the only 2 white kids.
There was a boy who lived down the street, my sister and I, and we were the only white kids the school had 3,800 students.
Wow.
And we were the only ones. And so it was like, why mess with us, And so we just got up. But the school would know when there was going to be trouble, because we never got an early dismissal. We would leave. And somebody one time thought I had a suede coat, and I came back to my locker and my door was twisted off. And they left the coat too. I mean, even though it wasn't suede, it was like, the man.
Was probably a disappointment for the person that worked that hard trying to get into it. But, and see, that's the thing that a lot of folks don't understand. The cultural difference between rural Campbell County, young folks growing up out here, and they know their cousins and they're hardworking people in the hay fields and stuff like that. They need teachers that have had other experiences, even if the other teacher has not lived those. They need to be taught what happens in the rest of the world.
I was told one time I interviewed for a teaching position, and the principal hired somebody else, just out of school or whatever, and I subbed in this teacher's class one time, and they were doing about immigration and the Depression and stuff, and I had all this information, and the principal goes, "What? You should share this stuff with these young teachers." I said, "You should have hired me."
Yeah. Well, Leo, I'm going to come back to you here again. Your career at the Enquirer was long, and your surprise party was certainly a surprise. And in that time frame, that 40 years, did you see a lot of technology change in the printing and mail distribution?
There was a lot of technology change. First of all, when they took the papers off the presses, they would take them off by hand. They came down conveyors. Then later on, they had machines that stacked them. There'd be 25 papers would come down, and this bucket would turn. 25 more would come down, and an arm would kick them out, and they'd come down and tie them in a strapping machine. When I first started working there, they used a lot of wire, but I guess wire became expensive because later on they started using plastic, which was a whole lot cheaper to tie up the papers and everything. So.
Yeah. Now, did you ever, when you grew up in Covington, were there kids on the corner selling newspapers?
In downtown Covington there was.
But you didn't grow up in downtown, you were further out?
I wasn't exactly downtown, but I wasn't far from it. I
Uh-huh.
lived on Campbell Street, which is near 15th and Eastern.
So where did you go to school?
I went to St. Joseph's School at 12th and Scott Street in Covington. Went there first grade through 8th. Then I went to Covington Catholic for 4 years after that.
And that was already on Dixie Highway at that
It
point?
was on Dixie Highway, yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Now, did you do any sports in high school? Or?
I tried out for the basketball team, but I wasn't that good, so I didn't make it.
Well, I think most of us, our athletic career was pretty short compared to our academic career.
Yeah, that's true.
It's probably a good thing because there's not much market for freshman basketball players 40 years down the road.
It's true.
But I sure love all those kids that have the talent and the drive to do that. You know, everybody, we had a lot of kids in my school when I was growing up that they were farm kids, but their parents were insisting that they get the best education they could so they didn't have to work hard all their life, physical labor. And I think that still kind of carries on today. You need to be a little bit smarter than the guy next door, and you need to be working hard at what you're doing. And I'm saying this as a historian. History proves that those people that had a little bit more drive seem to succeed in whatever they're doing, whether it's sports, and the drive is usually encouragement from their parents or their aunts and uncles, people that want them to do so. I'm going to ask each of you, if you've got any advice for the next generation, what would it be? And I'll go with you first, Marie.
Well, with different things that happen in that, I think people should learn from history so that they don't make the same mistakes that may have happened before. And a good education is very important. And to try several things, not just get involved with as much as you can.
And Leo?
I would say stay in school, get a good education, and work hard, and you'll go a long way. That would be my advice.
And both of those are very good, sound advice.
And be honest, too.
Yeah. Now, are there other questions that we need to address?
You said you were in the military.
Yes, I was. I was in the Army Reserve from 1969 to 1975. I joined at Fort Thomas Army Reserve Post. I was there for about a year. Then they sent me to Kings Mill, Ohio. I did my basic training at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. It was the first time I ever flew in a plane. I was in a Piedmont prop jet, and it was in January during a snowstorm. Never been so scared in all my life. I was sitting right above the wing, and the wings, they look like bird wings. And then we got to, we were supposed to land in North Carolina, but we wound up, we had to stop in Charleston, West Virginia to de-ice the plane. And when we got back on, that was even scarier.
Yeah. Now, Charleston, West Virginia, it's on the top of a hill.
It's on top of a hill, yeah, it sure is.
And if the pilot misses the hill, I guess the next stop is North Carolina.
Yeah.
So how long, you were actually in the States most of the time you were in the
I was in the
service?
States the whole time, yes. I did my basic training at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. After basic training, well, at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, we were the first platoon to have M16s in basic training, and they were still trying to figure out the manual of arms, how to properly do that with us. But finally, I guess we got it down.
Yeah, because that was written in World War I.
Okay.
The first M1 rifles, and they were bigger, much bigger than an M16.
Yeah.
And I'm going to ask you a little bit about your reserve duty. What was your job?
My job was making acetylene and oxygen.
Making acetylene and oxygen at the same time?
At different times.
Oh,
Two different
so
plants,
yeah.
but we had to learn both. It was for the, I guess the welders.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how do you make acetylene?
Well, I know you have a chemical and you add water to it. I don't remember the chemical
Okay,
anymore.
yeah.
And it gives off a gas.
Okay. So it produces a gas and then you capture that
Then you
gas,
capture it,
and then they
yes.
compress that
Then they compress it.
and put it in tanks. And
Mhm.
yeah, you need acetylene and oxygen, but you don't want them both at the same time.
Not at the same time,
except
no.
if you're cutting.
But I did my advanced individual training at Fort Belvoir, Virginia, which is the home of the engineers,
Mhm.
because oxygen and acetylene, making that is an engineering, I guess you would call it, process.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, while I was there doing my advanced individual training, Fort Belvoir is about 15 or 20 miles away from Washington, D.C. And in 1970, they were having a lot of riots in Washington. So every time they needed somebody to load supplies, here they come down to grab us. So we were loading concertina barbed wire and tables and chairs and anything to set up a command post. But I remember this one time they sent us to this little concrete shack. It was off a ways, and it looked like ammunition we were loading, so I guess they were getting ready for anything. But we would go to Washington, like on the weekends, you know, when we were off. And the first time I ever smelled marijuana was down by the Washington Monument, because I'd never been exposed to that before.
Yeah. Probably somebody was sitting there doing glaucoma prevention, thinking how we can aluminum side the Washington Monument.
Yeah.
That's my interpretation of some recreational drug thoughts there in Washington. And as a result of you being in Washington, I'm sure you got to see a lot of our
Oh yeah, I
national
saw
monuments
everything,
and,
yes.
the Smithsonian. You've been there.
I walked to the top of the Washington Monument on the steps. I doubt if you can do that anymore.
Probably not. I think I did too a
Did
long
ya?
time ago.
Yeah.
And it was 726 steps.
It took a while to get there.
Yeah, we might need some current history buff to correct us on the street, the number of steps. But anyhow, that's everybody who's ever in the military has had some interesting thing that they would have not done had it not been for their involvement
That's
in the
true.
military. Now, as a member of the reserves, and you wound up at King's Mill, was that a pretty big operation, bigger than Fort Thomas,
I'd say
as a reserve unit?
it was probably similar.
Uh-huh.
But we had eventually got a, well, they sent us to King's Mill because the city of Fort Thomas, you couldn't produce acetylene there. They wouldn't let you, you know. So they moved us to King's Mill. And it was right at the time they were building King's Island. So there wasn't much up there. It was just mostly farmland.
Right.
And it used to be an old Nike missile. I think they worked on Nike missiles there at this place they sent us to. But we eventually got an acetylene plant, but when I got out, it still wasn't operational yet.
Now, the King's Mill area, I think there was some munition plants there.
There was.
Remington had something, there's a little town called Remington that named after the manufacturer of arms, and some other ones. So did you ever see any of that operation, just as a passerby? Or?
I drove by the old Remington cartridge plant, but it was on the way to get to the reserve center there.
And you did 2 weeks in the summer, every summer?
2 weeks in the summer.
And where did you do your summer training?
Okay. The first year, which would have been 1971, they flew us to Fort Belvoir, Virginia, and we did our training there on the oxygen and acetylene. The second year, I think money was tight, so they bused us to Fort Belvoir. It was like a 12-hour ride, and we were dead when we got there.
Yeah.
So the third year, they bused us again to Fort Belvoir. But then budgets really got tight. The fourth year, they sent me to Fort Benjamin Harrison. And at Fort Benjamin Harrison during World War II, they had German prisoners of war there. And they housed them in tents on concrete slabs. So they still had the concrete slabs there. So anyway, our job was to dig trenches around these slabs because they were going to put dog kennels on them for the officers. And anyway, they needed a way to like drain.
Sure.
So anyway, that's my fourth year of summer camp. That's what I did. Fifth year, they sent us to Fort Knox. I guess still, you know, on account of the budget. And we did a lot of remodeling work on some of the barracks and officers' quarters and stuff down there.
So you were in the engineering battalion the entire time?
Engineering, yes.
Let's see that.
You know, you were talking about German POWs. I guess it was about the year 1978. I found my first cousins in Germany. My great-grandmother had come from the area of learning in Germany. So I actually found some cousins there. And they wrote and asked if it would be okay to come over. I said, sure, why not? So anyway, when they came over here, I found out that their father was a German soldier in World War II. And he was actually captured by the Americans. And he was sent to Virginia to work on a farm. And evidently, he said it was pretty good duty up there. They were nice to him and everything.
Yeah.
So it was better than being shot at.
Yeah. And reality, a lot of the American soldiers who had been farming wound up in the service, and their wives and their family were the ones that were responsible. So, in reality, the farm work still kept going. It wasn't always done by prisoners. It was a lot of times done by tenant farmers and people that maybe needed income. But that's always, it always surprised me that because the German people were such good at farming,
Yeah.
they wound up even as prisoners of war. And of course, the people that were their hosts treated them with respect and for their knowledge.
I just read an article about that. Most of the people were nice to him.
Sure.
Yeah,
It's just an interesting time.
really.
And your military career brought both of you to a different place in your life, and you both benefited from.
It makes you really grow up a lot too. I think just for the short time I was in there, just, you really grow up a lot being away from home and being on your own.
Yeah.
So,
Now, when you were in basic training, were there a lot of other engineers from Fort Thomas with you, or?
there was about 5 or 6.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because I know as reservists, people join together sometimes, and
You get
sometimes,
sent off together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and that works out pretty good.
But I don't know how long the MOS of oxygen and making oxygen and acetylene was down at Fort Thomas. But me and the group I was with, we were the first ones that were ever sent to that school. The rest of them were like, they would send them to like combat engineer school or something like that. So we were the first ones in our outfit to actually have the training that was needed to make oxygen and acetylene. So,
That's amazing. I find
it
that
is.
And
Here we have this MOS, the only time they learned it was summer camp. They never
Yeah.
even had the basic,
Yeah.
training for it.
When I want to say when I was in basic training, I was told to go over to this one building, and what they wanted was, because of my high scores on the test going into the Air Force, they wanted me to be an air traffic controller. But at the time, I wore glasses, and they go, "Oh no, you can't do that. We're wearing glasses." And then being in a medical squadron, we would have mobility and disaster training. And, you got to carry somebody over a fence and over through a window and do all this other kind of stuff. And why carry somebody big? So they would use me, and they would carry me through there. And then also in the thing where, the conditions of where the girls, the RAFs, were living, we had, when the first woman general in the Air Force, Jeannie Holmes, she came to Shepherd, and it was like in March, and the ground was all muddy, and we were walking, and we didn't have walkways. We had those little packing crate things, those pile ones. Skids.
Yeah.
That's what, and she saw that, and she said, "I'm coming back in 3 weeks, and my girls better have sidewalks," and we did.
So somebody from the Corps of Engineers probably sent a bunch of Army guys up on reserves, go up there and build them some sidewalks. That's kind of the way things work now.
And when you were talking about, how you got transported and that, one of my 2 weeks during the reserves was to go down to Biloxi, Mississippi, down to Keesler, and we went on a C-130, and so you sat sideways in these web seats. You had to wear your field jacket because there wasn't any heat or anything in there. You wore your earplugs, and the bathroom was a 5-gallon bucket behind a little shower curtain thing. And that's how we flew down to Biloxi.
So this is an Air Force C-130?
Yes.
Oh, see, and I thought they had luxurious restaurants and restrooms and whatever.
That a lot of POWs were coming back, and so a group of us, we all went down to the flight line, and we all held up signs and everything for the guys all coming back, because their family wasn't going to see them just yet, but they were coming into the country and that, and it's like, and they had set aside a bunch of beer and different things like that for these guys, and they were going, we just want a big glass of milk.
Yeah.
We don't want the beer and then. And then later on, when they were bringing Vietnamese like refugees in, they had all this food that they were taking from the
mess halls.
Yeah, for them, and they didn't want all the steaks and all that kind of stuff. They wanted those hot dogs and rice and things
Yeah.
along that line. But when we were up at Wright Penn, you would eat at the hospital. We would eat really well because that's what generals and things were always coming in. So we always, once a month, we had a surf and turf day.
Oh.
Air Force.
See, that's what I said. The Air Force looked better in Vietnam than I did in the States and the Army. You're there.
Well, like in the military, it's a job that you just happen to wear a uniform for.
Yeah.
Unless there's a war going on.
Yeah.
One of the things you probably noticed in basic training is when you march, you're usually singing a song or something. There's an awful lot of profanity in the stuff.
Yeah.
You marched and you were singing all along the way.
Yes.
And I think right as I was getting out of basic training, they were starting to change that to get away from it. They were trying to, clean it up some.
Yeah.
But some of the stuff they made us say, it was pretty bad.
We didn't sing any dirty songs, but we did have
we
songs.
did a lot.
Well, we sang songs as we were marching in that. And our group, our flight, everybody had a name, and our flight was Harami, means we pulled together. It's Swahili. Some of the girls came up with that.
Yeah. And see, those are little intricate things that every outfit has a nickname or a mascot name or something like that. Some of them we remember, some of them we tried to forget because they weren't real popular and they weren't complimentary to your outfit. Well, thanks again. I guess my name is going to be